Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, Parler, and Instagram. And of course, be sure to visit www.mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
Mr. Pat Morita. Oh, yeah.
Pat Morita, ladies and gentlemen.
Lenny Bruce's mother named him the Hip Nip, but he hung on because now all of a sudden he had an angle.
He would tend to do the same show over again, and then he couldn't figure out why he wasn't getting laughs.
I don't think he paid much attention to the rules of the game. He kind of did what he wanted to do.
He really embraced the things that many of us run away from. He ran to it.
He opened for Vic Damone, Connie Stevens, and Red Fox, who put him on his show.
He was just a lovely, lovely man.
Pat went on and became a huge star.
And he created one of the iconic characters in American cinema.
One thing I learned with comics is they were actually some of the most unhappy, tortured people, and their comedy comes from pain.
I mean, he was in a cast for like 9 years, from his knees to like his neck for his childhood.
The day he gets out, he walks into a war.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 323. Releasing February 5 on digital is More Than Miyagi, the Pat Morita Story, a documentary that delves into the life and career of the legendary Pat Morita. Featuring depth-filled insight from an impressive roster of interview heads and never-before-seen archive footage, More Than Miyagi not only presents the struggles that Morita had to endure throughout his life, but also presents the impact the Oscar nominee had both on and off the screen, which can still be felt today. And joining me now on the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is the director of More Than Miyagi, Kevin Derek. Kevin, I thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
So I was reading an interview that you did for The Real Miyagi from a couple of years ago, and you talked about how documentaries are love projects and you really truly need to believe in the subject matter. So what was it about Pat Morita that really inspired you with the passion to make a documentary about him?
You know, we were working on a documentary back in 2015. That one was called The Real Miyagi. I've been stuck in this karate universe for a while now. But anyways, that was a documentary on my karate master, Fumio Demura. He had done all the stunts for Pat Morita and all of the films that he's done, all the Karate Kid franchise, the O'Hara series, and all that stuff. So they were pretty good friends, and it was important for me to interview at least someone from Pat's side, which was Evelyn. You know, Evelyn was the third wife of Pat Morita. So when after the interview, she started telling me all these stories, like on the side, she said, you know, how he suffered so much in tuberculosis internment camp, and then how he saw his father die in front of him. And all of these stories stuck with me. And then a year later, when the documentary came out on Netflix, she called me. She said, Kevin, the documentary made me so emotional. You did such an awesome job. And that's where I took it upon myself to ask her. I said, hey, Evelyn, what do you think if we do a documentary on Pat? In the beginning, she was excited, but she said she wants to do a narrative instead, like, you know, a biopic feature on his life. And I said, well, this would be a good start because it would generate a lot of interest, and then it will be easier for us to, you know, get a producer attached and get financing and all that stuff. So basically, that's how that came to be about. And at the same time, Pat was working on a manuscript. I think he started writing that in 1996. He didn't really get to finish it. I think he got maybe, I would say, like 75% through. And then Pat told Evelyn, hey, if anything happens to me, I want you to finish this and get it out there somehow, whether it's a book, whatever, you know, documentary, film, or whatever. Because, you know, if I can save a poor soul from going through what I went through, that would be worth it for me. So I guess in a way, making this documentary, you know, we kind of fulfilled Pat's wishes.
You mentioned before that when you spoke to Evelyn, that she told you all about Pat's story. You mentioned the spinal condition that he had. He was in a cast from the ages of 2 to 11, and or taken to an internment camp right after. I think it was right after he left the hospital, taken straight to an internment camp during World War II. Are these stories, how much of this did you know of, or if any of it at all, before you met Evelyn and she told this to you?
I did. Well, there's only a little bit of research you can do online. I mean, the only thing that it says it's, about is tuberculosis and internment camp.
Yeah.
The only thing that I really didn't know was how severe his alcoholism was and what he turned into after he drank. I mean, Pat is a lovely, nice person. Whoever that I speak with, they have nothing but kind words to say. But, it's alcoholism. People can relate to it. I'm sure, you probably know of someone or someone in your family. Like my family, I have like two uncles that are alcoholics. So it's like a disease. It's what Evelyn says in the film. It's kind of like having cancer. You don't stop loving someone just because they have cancer. So this is the kind of same thing. I think when people watch this and they realize all the stuff that he went through, it kind of justifies him drinking. I mean, if it was me, I would have probably done worse things,
You met Morita back when you were 15 years old, I think it was. How did that come about, and what memories do you have of that encounter?
Oh, true. Well, the same sensei that I was talking to you about, Fumi Demura, he had a yearly tournament. And then every year, there would be someone that shows up, Chuck Norris, Bob Wald, all the karate, famous karate people. And then this was 1983, I think, a year before the Karate Kid came out. So I had only known him as Happy Days Arnold. So I go to the tournament and I see him sitting next to my karate teacher. And right next to him, there's an empty chair. So, I mean, I was 15 and I don't have a problem like approaching anyone. If I need to say something to someone, I just, go and just tell them what I think. So anyways, I just went and sat right next to him and I said a few things. He very nice, warm, loving person. He could relate to kids. He likes kids because, the experience he had in the internment camps, he just feels for kids and he likes to help them. So basically, we just sat and talked for a little brief talk. And then I asked him, hey, can I get a picture with you? And luckily, my brother was there and he was a photographer and he took a picture. And that was my only, experience that I had with him. And then, who would have known 30 years later, I would be doing a documentary on his life. So it's just kind of weird how it played out.
If he was there with your sensei, Fumio, does that mean he was already cast as Miyagi at that point?
John Avildsen already had his eyes set on Pat Morita. It was the producer, Jerry Weintraub, who was bringing in every karate master. But the problem was none of the karate masters that he was bringing from Japan or from here, their English wasn't really that good. Sensei Fumi Demura was telling me when he went, he thought, it's just like a line or something that he has to do. And then when he got the script, page after page, it said Miyagi, Miyagi, Miyagi. And he said, this is not my thing. There's no way I can remember all these lines. And, his English is kind of limited. And according to him, he said, I just passed on it.
Yeah. The thing about Pat Morita that really struck me when I was watching the movie is that he really seems like a man that was stuck between two cultures. And I think that can be the case quite a bit with people who come from immigrant families. So my family came to Australia from Croatia in 1969. So I'm a first generation Australian. And I think with yourself, your family's from Iraq. Is that correct?
Iran. Well, I'm from Iran, yes.
Iran.
Yes.
And so I'm sure that you can also kind of sympathize with this as well, in that I don't know about you, but with myself, I'm kind of like in the same boat as Morita in that I'm proud of the heritage I come from. I'm not that immersed in it, though. And it seemed to be the same thing with Pat Morita. He didn't know Japanese. He never really went to Japan. I think Karate Kid Part 2 was actually filmed in Hawaii and not in Japan.
Correct. That's correct, yes.
And so do you think that lack of really true connection to his ancestry became like cause of shame for Morita in any part during his life?
Well, you have to think that, okay, his family was poor. So when the time that he was spending in the hospital from ages 2 to 11, they lived far away and they really couldn't come and see him all the time. So it's basically the nurses that raised him. So, and then, they spoke English, and the only time that he got a chance to be with his family the whole time is, when the war happened and they took him to the internment camps. And at that point, all he could speak was English, and his parents didn't really know that much English. So I'm sure it was difficult for him. Yeah, I don't really know that much, like what he went through and all that stuff. So basically, from what I gather from all the interviews that I did, I'm assuming it must have been really difficult for him.
Something that really struck me as well is just how prolific he was in the 70s. I knew that he was in Happy Days as Arnold. And I remember seeing him in MASH. We have the reruns here quite a bit in Australia of both shows. But he was like stand-up. He was a stand-up comedian in the 70s. His nickname, and any offense to anyone out there, I'm very sorry, but his name was the Hip Nip. And a lot of it did do with stereotype and typecasting. Representation is such a big thing on the screen today. It seemed to me, though, that Morita wanted to be anything but an Asian caricature, considering, his connection with his Japanese ancestry, etc. He did come across more American than Japanese in a lot of ways, and I think he really wanted that as well. Do you think that is something that you took away from looking at his career from the outside in?
We actually were going to call this documentary The Hip Nip, believe it or not. But then through some research and talking to some people, they said, no. That's not a good idea. If you do that, you're going to piss a lot of people off. Right. And I told them, well, that's the name that he was given. It's not like I made this up and I'm just trying to be controversial. That was what he was known for.
Yeah.
But, I don't think anyone in any culture likes to be stereotyped for any reason. I mean, you come from another country, and a great example is the Black Lives Matter and what's happening with them in the Middle Eastern community. If you watch the media, they basically brainwash you on both sides. Just from my experience. You show someone, that's wearing a hijab, the first thing people do instantly is think about a terrorist.
Right.
You see a Middle Eastern person with a beard, first thing that comes to your mind is terrorist. It gets so bad to a certain extent that one time I went and we were protesting something peaceful. It was in downtown LA, and I was surrounded by people who were the same culture I was, and I felt a little tense. Why? Because all the stuff that they're showing you in the media, even though everyone looked like me, everyone talked like me, still I was frightened. Why? Because of what they're feeding you in the media. So, the same thing with Asian culture. You look at an Asian, you automatically think that he knows the martial arts, or this Asian guy is a bad driver. I'm sure that gets tiring after a while. I'm sure Pat wanted to be portrayed as a doctor, a lawyer, or just simply as an American. And I don't think he got the chance to do that. If you really analyze Karate Kid, what is the character of Mr. Miyagi? It's a stereotypical character. It's a Japanese master. So even though it was done in a positive way, and everyone, it's an iconic character, and I'm very happy for him that he got a chance to do that. But still, this is a stereotypical character. And what now, after 90 years of Oscar, is they finally changed the qualification. That I think 50% of your cast has to be minor. I don't know, 50, 25, but it's a percentage that has to be minorities in order to be qualified. And this is after 90 years. So, we're slowly getting there, but still all the stereotypical stuff still goes on to this day.
You mentioned Karate Kid just then, and of course your movie is More Than Miyagi. Miyagi, of course, Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid movies, for which Pat Morita was Oscar nominated for. For all of the work that he's done after that, I didn't even know he was actually nominated for Emmy and Golden Globes after the Karate Kid for other roles.
Right.
This is the role that people will always remember Pat Morita for. Do you think that he viewed that as a blessing or a curse?
To be known for anything is great. I spoke to a whole bunch of people, like even Henry Winkler. He said, it's very hard coming out of what people perceive you as. So he was
Yeah.
always cons and stuff like that. So Pat went through the same thing. If you look at his IMDb page, after Karate Kid, it was Karate Master this, Karate Master that. There was a title that I saw. It was called The Karate Dog. But that's a question that I would have liked to ask him. I'm sure any kind of work as an actor is great, but at the same time, you want to be known for other things as well. Look at a good example is all the Karate Kid films. The female stars like Elizabeth Shue, Hilary Swank, Robin Lively, they distanced themselves from the Karate Kid films. All of them. You don't see them doing any kind of interviews. It's just lately, after 30 years, Elizabeth Shue is coming and doing stuff. But they distance themselves on purpose so they don't get pigeonholed like Pat. Especially when you're 20 years old, it's not a good thing. But now they already been established. Hillary's, a wonderful actress. She's been established, won awards and stuff like that. So right now, it doesn't matter if she comes back and talks about it, but I'm sure all of them, they distance themselves for that reason.
Looking at your filmography, and martial arts plays a big, big role in it. Your other documentaries deal with martial arts themes as well. You yourself are a martial arts practitioner. Back when Karate Kid came out, how big was that in regards to martial arts in America? Can you definitely put down a line in the sand and say there was a pre-Karate Kid and post-Karate Kid time in America when it came to that movie?
Yes. I don't know if you remember when Enter the Dragon came out with Bruce Lee.
That's 73.
Correct. So that started like a kung fu sensation. I don't know if you remember that song that said, "Everybody is kung fu fighting." Remember?
Yes.
It's the same thing Karate Kid did for the karate world. When it came out, it was 1984. At that point, I had already been in karate for 5 years, and I was a red belt or something like that. So the Karate Kid film was a big deal for us being in martial artists because it legitimized what we were doing.
Yeah.
And it popularized karate to the general public. And all of a sudden, karate is like in the forefront, and everyone wanted to take karate. I remember in my sensei's class for a whole month, you would see people lined up wanting to sign up. And I remember the opening night very clearly. I usually never stand in lines to watch film, but for this one, the lines were. I live in Orange County, California, and the lines were wrapped around all the way, around the mall for people to watch that film. And the funniest story is that I run a film festival, and 30 years later, we ended up honoring John Avildsen, the director of the Karate Kid film, in the same theater that I watched the Karate Kid film when I was 15 years old. So I think that was kind of, it's weird how things happen,
It is. And speaking how weird how things are happening, now Cobra Kai is such a big show, and 3 seasons in, everything Karate Kid is just huge. When you started working on this documentary, More Than Miyagi, how long ago was that? And was there at that time, was Cobra Kai out yet, or was that in production at all?
No, there was no Cobra Kai at all in sight. We started 2016. When you do a love project, you don't have financing up front, and then you have to use your own money, and you gotta call everyone yourself. And what took long is the interviews that we had to set up, because we had to work around all these people's schedules and all that stuff. So 2016 we started shooting, and then Cobra Kai came a year after that. And then when they were in the first season is when we interviewed Ralph Macchio, and he was telling us about, how that happened and all that stuff.
It's such an impressive group of people that you have in your film. You mentioned Ralph Macchio there, William Zabka, Martin Cove. And also, people from Henry Winkler, other people from the Happy Days cast as well, and Larry Miller and Tommy Chong from the stand-up scene. To me, it says something about Pat Morita, the man, that everyone will want to step up, go on camera, interview, talk about him in such impressive fashion, in such warm fashion. If a person's life can be weighed by the impact that they had on people, what do you say that says about Pat Morita as a man and as an actor?
Obviously, all the people that we interviewed, Pat had somehow, have impacted their life for the better. That's the reason they participated. I mean, none of them we really had to convince and say, hey, please, or well, they did it because they loved Pat. And Pat was a warm, loving, funny, kind human being. And, I hope he's looking down on us and giving us a thumbs up right now. But yeah.
I think he's going to give a thumbs up to this documentary for sure. For everyone out there, More Than Miyagi, the Pat Morita Story, releases February 5. You can actually, there's a website, morethanmiyagi.com, and there you can see where the film is screening. Worldwide for Vimeo, for all my Australian listeners. So for people in the US, you have Amazon, you got Vudu, Google Play. And also at the website, you can pre-order the Blu-ray and DVD now. There's T-shirts, there's posters. It's a really cool website, morethanmiyagi.com. And that's for the More Than Miyagi, the Pat Morita Story documentary, February 5. And Kevin Dereka, thank you very much for your time today. And congratulations with the film. It was such a great watch. It was such an illuminating watch as well. And I think it's really going to remind people just what a complete showman and entertainer and also terrific human being Pat Morita was. So congratulations to you in regards to that.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Matt.